Hey there everyone, this is Sonia with S&B Music, and today we'll be learning about the music staff.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 1, The Staff. Today we will be discussing what the musical staff is, what does it look like, why do we need to know about the staff, and the 3 basic elements we need to know in order to understand how to read it. So the staff is made up of 5 lines and 4 spaces. The reason we need to know about the staff is because the staff is basically the what our sheet music is written on so that we can know how to read music for piano, guitar, bass, and any other instrument you can really think of. The 3 key elements we need to know in order to learn how to read the staff are the clef, the key signatures, and the time signatures. 3 which are very basic but very important in knowing how to read sheet music on a staff. So let's go to our first one, which is the clef. For this purpose of this video, we will be discussing the 2 most basic clefs. The first one being the treble clef, which is also known as a G clef, a very recognized symbol. The second clef we will be talking about is going to be the bass clef, another recognized symbol, and the bass clef is also known as the F clef, and there's a reason why it's called a G clef and an F clef that we will be discussing on later. So to begin with, let's look at our treble clef. So we will need to draw a staff, which is once again made up of 5 lines and 4 spaces. So when we read music in a treble clef, the clefs are basically almost the language indicative on how we are going to read the staff. So when we have the treble clef, you can see that the little loop in the middle is touching a certain line. And that certain line has a name, and that's why it's attributed as the G clef. But let's look at the spaces first. The spaces have particular names, F, A, C, E. And then the lines itself have a different letter name to them. E, G, B, D, and F. Now, for the lines, there is a little, for those acronyms, there is a phrase you can use to remember the letter names of those lines, which is every good boy does fine. That is one easy way of remembering the letter names for those lines. And for the spaces, well, it spells out the word face. So that's pretty self-explanatory word in order to remember the name of the spaces. But yes, as you can see where the line in the middle is, if you follow that line, you can see that the letter that represented is a G, which is one of the reasons why it's called the G clef as well. Okay, so let's move on to our bass clef. Our bass clef is another language in which we read the musical staff, and this has the spaces and the lines have different letter names to them. As you can see, the spaces, they have A, C, E, G, and the phrase we can use in order to remember the names of the letters for these spaces are all cows eat grass. So yeah, this is a phrase you can use in order to remember the letter name for the spaces, starting from bottom going to the top. And for our lines, our letter names change as well. Now that we're on the bass clef, the bottom one is G, followed by B, D, F, A. And for this one, there is also a phrase that follows so that you can remember the name of the letter names for the lines when we are reading in the bass clef. And that would be good boys do fine always. So these are phrases you can use in order to remember the letter names for the lines and spaces for both the treble and bass clef. And as you can see, the 2 dots on the bass clef, they are right. The center line of those dots is the line that contributes to the letter F, which is why it's also called the F clef. Now, We can add lines above and below the staff. And these particular lines have a special name. These are called ledger lines. You can add more than one on the top and the bottom. For the purposes of this video, I'm only adding one at the top, one at the bottom, and one in the middle of each of the staffs. But yeah, these extra lines are ledger lines, and you can use them to add more music notes that you couldn't fit, obviously, in our staff, since it's only made up of 5 lines and 4 spaces. And these follow a pattern. So after F in the treble, we see that it goes on, the space that follows is a G, and then our ledger line at the top is an A, and then the space above that ledger line is a B. And if we look at the bottom of our treble clef, the space right below the line of E is a D. That middle ledger line is the C, and below that is a B. So now we're getting on our bass clef. Our bass clef, when we look at the bottom of our bass clef, we end with the line G, and that space right below is an F. That ledger line at the bottom is an E, and then the space after our ledger line is a D. Now, usually this is one way that you see a staff, commonly see staff looking this way. When a staff looks this way, when it's connected by a brace on the side, it's usually indicative that this is sheet music for piano. And now this ledger line in the middle has a special name. Well, not a special name, but the letter, that C, is a very special C in piano music. It's the middle C. When you start playing piano, one thing you're going to hear a lot is find the middle C, and then you'll be able to follow the pattern. So what do I mean by the pattern? Our musical alphabet has 7 letters that create a pattern that repeats over and over again. So our 7 letters that we use in our musical alphabet are A, B, C, D, E, and F, G. So A, B, C, D, E, F, G are the 7 letters that we use in the musical alphabet, and these repeat over and over again across our staff. As you can see, if we start from our bass clef in the space, it goes A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, and it goes on all the way, repeating over and over again. All right, so key signatures in itself would be the next basic element we need to know, but that's a whole discussion in itself. So we'll move on to time signatures. So time signatures, what is it? What do they look like? And what do we really need to know about them? So time signatures are actually a very important element in music, in reading music as well. And I'll probably dive even deeper into the subject of time signatures on a later video, but for the purposes of this one, we will keep it pretty simple. So let's begin with our staff. The first thing we see when we read a staff is always going to be your clef. The following thing you would see in a staff after your clef would be your key signature, which I said we will be talking about later in another video in itself. And following the key signatures, you will find the time signature in the staff. So the most common time signature that a lot of people are going to encounter is the time signature of 4/4. Some people see this as 4/4, but it is not a fraction. Do not write it as a fraction. I once read it as a fraction, and my teacher let me know it is not a fraction. So, these numbers have actually a special meaning. There's a reason we have a number at the top and the bottom. So the bottom at the top means that you are going to have, for this example, we are going to have 4 beats per measure. We will get into discussing more about these time signatures later as I discuss. And then the bottom number represents what note is going to receive a beat. So every note that we have has almost like a number ID, like an ID number that represents it, which is the reason why there's a 4 at the bottom, which we will also discuss later when we talk more in detail about time signatures. So let's see. Oh, I realized I've had the letters 2 down the video. So let me put it in a position where it's more comfortable for us to read. So like I mentioned, and whenever you encounter a musical staff, the first thing you're going to see is your clef followed by a key signature. Now, one little tip I am going to give, where the time signature goes, if it's usually blank, it means that we will probably be reading the music in a C major or an A minor scale. But like I said, we will talk more about that. But yeah, if it's blank, it's usually C major or A minor. And after the key signature, like I discussed, it's followed by a time signature. And the number at the top represents the beat per measure, and the number at the bottom represents what note is going to get a beat. So this you will learn more in detail when I discuss about time signatures, because that's a whole subject in itself as well. But I wanted you all to know the basics of what the staff looks like, what you will need in order to learn how to read the staff. So I figured for this last little portion, we will kind of test our skills that we've learned thus far. So our musical alphabet is A through G. We have seen what the spaces and lines mean, what are their letter names when we look at it in the treble clef as well as the bass clef. If you need to go back, please feel free to go back and relearn where the lines are and the spaces are and what is their letter that names that line and space. That way we are able to do this little activity. So in this little activity, I put little dots across the both treble and bass staff. And what you will need to do is you can rewind the video and look at where I have placed the dots. And when you rewind in the video, go and look at and see what that particular line and space means, what the letter names are. And what you are going to do is you are going to simply name the dot. What does that first line dot mean? And yeah, so I will keep this up still so you can copy it, go back, review it, and once you have figured out what each dot and space letter name is, leave it down in the comments and I will let you know if they're correct. All right, have fun and see you on the next episode.